Hey everybody! Welcome back to a new video. Welcome to 2021. Happy New Year. I am so relieved that 2020 is over. And I know this year, just the change of the last digit of the year is not going to miraculously change everything. But knowing that 2020 is over gives me a lot of peace. So 2020, amongst everything that it was also a year where I read too much. I did not keep track of all of the books that I read until I think mid 2020, but all the books that I have kept a record of has reached more than 50. I think I've read about 60 books so far. I was initially planning to make an ode to 2020 sort of a video, but it did not feel very authentic and I didn't put it up. But then I was struck with this idea of making a list of top 10 books that I read in 2020. So before we get into the actual list, there are a few things that I want to mention. The first thing is 2020 was the first year when I started actually reading classic literature. I read a lot of Jane Austen. I read Charlotte Bronte, L.M. Montgomery. What else did I read? Yeah, I think that's all. So this was being the first year that I actually dipped my feet into classic literature. I was not expecting to be blown away by classical literature. So for me, classics were always something that I thought were boring because, of course, they're set in a time period that is like not something that we can relate to right now. But they were so good. I do remember that I used to love Wuthering Heights when I was in school. And I don't know why I never read anymore. So this list is going to have a few of the classic literature that I read. And finding top 10 out of all of these amazing books that I read was very, very difficult for me. So I found a little way to cheat. And so yeah, I'm going to stop rambling now and let's get into it. So the first book that I want to talk about, Anne of Green Gables. This is a book by L.M. Montgomery. This book is fantastic. So there's this girl, Anne Shirley. She's 11 years old. She's an orphan and she's adopted by the Cuthberts. The Cuthberts actually wanted a boy so that he would help them around in the farms because they're getting old. They can't work as much as they used to, etc., etc. But because of a mistake, the orphanage sends Anne, a little girl. So Anne is so dramatic. She is hilarious and she sort of reminds me of my younger sister. She's sarcastic, she has this really wild imagination and she gets into a lot of trouble. It's actually really, really funny and I don't want to give too much away because I want you to read it. If you want to get into classic literature, why do I keep saying classical? If you want to get into classic literature, Anne of Green Gables is an amazing book to start off with. This book follows her as she grows up from the age of 11 to about the age of 16, 17. And it follows her journey, her adventures in school. She has these friends. She has unexpected friends. This book is just written so well. It's very lighthearted, very warm, it's very funny. But there's this one point. There's this unexpected sad thing that happens. I had to just stop what I was doing. I remember I was listening to the audiobook and I just had to sit down and listen to it again because I thought I misheard it. It is just so sad. But apart from that one thing, it's sad, but of course, like, it's beautiful in its own way. This book is a must read. So the second book is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. Jane Austen has a particular way of writing which I adore. So Jane Austen is very funny. She's very sassy the way she writes. She's very witty. This book is based in late 1700s. So Sense and Sensibility follows two sisters. Eleanor, she's the elder one, and Marianne, she's the younger one. These sisters have quite different characters. They have quite different habits and mannerisms and everything. And this story sort of follows both of them together and it is just so beautiful. Jane Austen has this way of writing plots that seem to be very predictable, but they're not. And I wouldn't say that for all of her books, but most of her books have these really, really amazing plots. And Sense and Sensibility has by far the best plot that I've read in her books. Those plots also have subplots. So it's like a very interesting read. You will not get bored of it. I did not get bored of it. So it has a lot of deceit, heartbreak, unexpected happy stuff happening. The ending is very well written. It's a happy ending. It's a romance. The third book in my list is Tower of Nero from the series Trials of Apollo. It's written by Rick Riordan. I've been reading Rick Riordan's book for the past 10 or 11 years. The first book that I read was Percy Jackson, obviously. And these books are written so well. I mean, if you don't read it, you will not understand what I mean. And I don't want to keep talking about this book because it just, I cannot describe it. So this series is so important to me. I've been reading it for the longest time. And I will go as far as to say that I love these books more than I ever loved Harry Potter. Yes, I love Harry Potter series, okay. But this series has my heart and my soul. So this starts with the Percy Jackson series. It's a Greek mythology series. Percy Jackson then goes on to the Heroes of Olympus series, and then Trials of Apollo. So it's like a very, very long, extended, stretched out series. And this was the last book of the series that I've been reading for the last 10 years. And I got emotional because it was the last book. But also this was the book. This was the series that started my love for Greek mythology. This is why I know so much about Greek mythology. And Rick Riordan, of course, has written so many other wonderful series. But this is my favorite series in the entire world. And I'm just really sad that it's ended. Of course, I can always reread it. Okay, if I could erase my memory of a certain book or series so that I could reread it again, it would be this. I want to forget the plot of the Greek mythology series and read it from the first book, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. And see, if you're judging me based off the movie that you watched, I mean, don't even talk to me. But and there are so many people who love these series. My sister is crazy about it, of course. And I got my friend into it, and my sister's getting other friends into it. So people who read this series just feel like an extended family to me. That is how much this means to me. So of course this had to be on my top 10. Okay, number 4 is Howl's Moving Castle. So I have watched the Studio Ghibli version of the movie. I did not know that a book existed. And when I read it, okay, if you've watched the Ghibli version and if you've loved it, if you love Sophie, you're going to love the book. So for those who don't know, this movie follows the adventures of Sophie. She's a young girl. She's cursed by the Witch of the Waste. So she's cursed to be an old woman. And then she joins Wizard Howl. His name is Howl. So Wizard Howl in his moving castle. So he has a castle that moves around. And it follows their adventures. And it is just so funny. Sophie is such an amazing character. Howl is so dramatic. Calcifer is one of my favorite demons amongst every fantasy book that I've read. It is so well written. It's funny. It's sassy. And the best part, one of the best parts about this book is the chapters have names. And I love books that have chapters that have names instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And the names are so funny. Everything about this book is delightful, and I think this is a book for all ages. So we are halfway through the list. Number 5 is Aancy Boyce by Neil Gaiman. If you know me and if you know my sister, you know that both of us are a little obsessed with Neil Gaiman's books. So Aancy Boyce is basically about the trickster god Anansi. Not him, his son. So he has a son, Charles. Charles does not know that his father is divine. He comes to his funeral, his father's funeral, and he discovers that he has a brother. Now this book is about Charles sort of coming in terms with his divinity. Of course, it's fantasy, it's magical, it's just one of those books that are written so well that you don't want to put it down. So number 6 on my list is 40 Rules of Love. This book blew my mind. I was not expecting to like it so much. So this book follows 2 lives parallelly. One is set in the modern times. It follows the life of a housewife, Ella, and she is kind of getting a little bored, a little unhappy with the life that she's been leading. And one day she gets a manuscript written about Rumi and his spiritual teacher, Shams. So now this book, 40 Rules of Love, follows both the lives of Ella and Rumi and Shams. And these lives are centuries apart, right? So from Ella's story, we see how how do I say it without giving away too much? We see how she sort of grows into the person that she is. So she's married, she has kids and everything, right? But she is so suffocated in her life that when she breaks free, it's just absolutely beautiful. What I learned about Rumi and Shams is it's not just it's not religious. It is more about spirituality, and it's about soulmates, and it tells you that soulmates are not just lovers. Soulmates are people who elevate you to be the best that you can. And for Rumi and Shams, Shams is the person who elevates Rumi, but of course the people around Rumi don't like Shams because they think he is a weird traveling dervish who doesn't know anything. So this book follows these 2 lives, completely different. However, they do have quite a few similarities, and it's just so beautifully written. There's so much that you can learn from this book, even though it is fiction. Is it fiction or is it non-fiction? I don't know, because Ella is fictional, but then Rumi is non-fiction, right? So this book it just blew my mind. And this book also tells us about how Rumi became a poet. I loved it. I really did. The 7th book in this list is Pachinko. So it follows a family, 3 generations of this family who live in Korea. So this is during the war. So they have to leave Korea. They go into Japan. But the Japanese don't like the Koreans. So they're very racist. And this is about like post-war world and the horrors of the war and these characters surviving in Japan. And then in the middle of the book, you have the World War II. There is the Nagasaki bombing in Japan. And it is just so sad, because it's not just about the story of the country or the war in general. It's about a family that had to go through it. It's just absolutely so sad, but I loved it. Okay, number 8. I've been reading so many books about mythology. I just realized I'm not religious, I'm just very curious. Cersei is written by Madeline Miller. So Cersei is the daughter of the Titan, the god of the sun, Helios. And Greek gods are absolute. She has a few powers, nothing great in the beginning, right? She has a few powers. She's not stunning. Pretty goddesses were preferred to powerful goddesses, basically. So she was neither pretty nor was she powerful. She discovered that she was an enchantress. She could work with herbs. She was a witch, basically, right? And because Zeus, I hate him. So because Zeus was so threatened by her, he had her banished. And so she was banished into the small island, and she became even more powerful. And it's just she is such an amazing, strong female character. She of course has to go through so much adversity. She loses loved ones, and well, she turns annoying sailors into pigs, so that's a plus point. We come across characters that have so much importance in Greek mythology. Yes, I am a little obsessed with Greek mythology. So we come across the Minotaur, who is a very important monster, and we come across Daedalus, who is is one of my favorites, and his son Icarus. But Icarus was very young in this book, and it's just absolutely amazing. Any book that has a strong female character who is demonized by the men around her because she's too intimidating, or those men just couldn't deal with a woman being more powerful than them. These books I just love these books. Cersei is divine. I cannot at this point remember any god or goddess who was humble, right? Humility is not associated with your Greek divinity. So Cersei is not like that. She's not arrogant, and she also sort of respects mortals. She doesn't think of them as a goddess's playthings to just be disposed of whenever. And this was really refreshing because I've never read a book wherein someone divine is also so human. Yeah, so I love Cersei. Okay, number 9 is American Gods. How many books about gods have I read? I do not know. Do not ask me. So American Gods is written by Neil Gaiman. I love how he writes. This book is amazing. So this book also has, I think, a series based off of it, but I've not watched the series. American Gods is about basically this guy, an ex-convict, whose name is Shadow, and he gets caught up in a war between old gods and modern gods. Old gods, you have all of the gods that you know from all mythologies. We have Odin, we meet Loki, we also meet Ganesha, we meet Kali, we meet some dwarves, some jinns, we meet Thoth, Anubis, we meet like all of the old gods. Old gods on one side and the new gods on the other side. So the new gods are technology, the internet, you have the media, globalization. So these are all gods. So basically the idea behind this is gods are powerful because of the believers and the worshippers. So if people stop worshipping gods, the gods grow weak. So gods feed off of our beliefs and the rituals and worship and everything that we do. So in today's world, there are a lot of people who don't believe in gods, and then the gods are growing weaker, and there's a lot of media advancements, the internet is gaining popularity, the old gods are declining. So there's like this constant war between them in the book, because it's fictional. And it is just so fascinating to look at it in that way, because we never do, right? We never think of it in this way. So this is like a very fresh perspective. It's very well written. This book is amazing. It's very thick. It's a very big book, so it took me a lot of time to read it. I was sort of delaying reading it because of how big the book was. But thank you, sister, for recommending the book and for making sure that I read it. I owe you one. Okay, number 10. I've cheated a bit. I promised myself to just have 10 books, right? But I couldn't leave these out. So Rainbow Rowell has written these 2 books, Carry On and Wayward Son. These books are amazing. It's about like this. It's a fantasy. It's very small. So this follows the adventures of 3 magical beings. Okay, so there's Simon. Simon is a wizard. He's the chosen one. There's Baz. Baz is a vampire. And there is Penny. So does it remind you of anything? Yes, it reminds me of Harry Potter. And they are students of Watford School of Magic. Does it remind you of anything? Yes, it reminds me of Hogwarts. So when I read it, I was like, is this fan fiction? I mean, what is it? And after you get over like the initial shock of it resembling Harry Potter so much, you realize that it is the most amazing magic wizardry book that you've ever read. These books I just love these books so much. And it's not very big, it's very small. The third book of this series is coming out, and I'm just dying to read it. It is so funny, and it's just weird. Like, if you're into like magical schools and wizards and stuff like that, this is a series that you have to read. Carry On, Wayward Son. Please read it. Okay, so we're done with 10 books, but I also want to sneak in 2 honorable mentions. Jane Eyre is another classic that I really loved. It's written by Charlotte Bronte. It has this amazing plot. Number 2 is Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Akirawa. So this book is written from the perspective of a cat, and it follows the cat and his owner, you could say, through this road trip, and it's so good. Okay, so that brings us finally to the end of this video. I hope that you liked it. I hope that you pick up a few of these books that I've read. If you do, I hope that you get in touch with me and tell me how you liked it. Let's fangirl together. I'm going to end this video here. I hope you have a wonderful 2021. I hope it's filled with memories and lots of books. Yes, so I hope you have a great year ahead. Ta-ta!